You are welcome to our regular lecture every Monday. And today is my lecture on the biochemistry of aging, the possible role of nucleotides in abating the aging process. So let us first define what is aging. What is aging? Aging is defined as the progressive accumulation of changes with time associated with responsible for the ever-increasing susceptibility to disease and death. It is a progressive accumulation of changes that occurs in our body associated with time and with disease and death. And according to this, in aging, there is a decline in biological function and the ability to adapt to metabolic stress. Aging is also termed as senescence. It is the decline of fitness components of an individual with an increasing age owing to internal, I repeat, internal deterioration or degradation. What are those changes that occurs? The changes mainly occurs in organs including reduction of immunity or reduction of your immune response, loss of muscle strength, decline in memory and cognition or the cognitive power or cognitive ability, and the loss of color in the hair or the gray hairs, and the loss of elasticity of the skin. So the loss of elasticity of the skin is associated with aging. The study of aging is called gerontology. Gerontology is the study of changes that occurs between maturity and death, along with factors that influence these changes in the timeline of the human biological timeline. So the people who are aging are called geriatrics in contrast to pediatrics. So if there's a pediatrics for children, for the aging, it's called geriatrics. Geriatrics then therefore focuses on the health care of the elderly and promote the health by preventing and or treating disease and disabilities associated in older adults. Biochemical gerontology, experimental gerontology and life extension is a subdiscipline in medicine that endeavors to slow, prevent, and even reverse the aging process in both humans and animals. That's why in the United States, there is called the Anti-Aging American Society of the Anti-Aging, of which I am a member. So it is a subdiscipline in medicine that takes up to tackle the slowing down of aging, prevent the aging, and even reverse the aging in both humans and animals. So what are life expectancies versus longevity? Life expectancy is calculated by averaging the overall births. So there is what we call averaging of the overall births is called life expectancy. I think the life expectancy of the Filipinos is between 69 to 70. That is the calculated averaging overall births of the population in the Philippines. It is dramatically influenced by infant mortality. So life expectancy, therefore, is reduced if there is increasing infant mortality due to disease. So longevity, on the other hand, is defined as the expected lifespan for those persons who survive infancy. So after your infancy and the life you live is called as, the number of years that you live is known as longevity, but life expectancy is an average of all births, including the infant mortality, no? So life expectancy versus longevity, they are two different things. So what are the multifactors that contributes to aging process? As you can see in the slide, the aging there, the phenomenon aging at the center is contributed primarily because of DNA damage, repair, and mutagenesis. It is also due to cell cycle regulation and changes due to cancers. It can also due to gerontological genes or the genes for aging are related to disease. So aging is also related to the shortening of the molecular cell clock of the cell, which is the telomere. Now, we have mentioned that last time that every time the cell divides, the telomere is shortened or reduced. That's why it will come to a point where a critical length of telomere, the cell will undergo its own programmed cell death and undergo its own death. Telomere shortening is associated with the end of your cell cycle. And it is age-related transcription and translation of changes that changes the protein and therefore changes the physiological balance. And of course, it is associated with signal transduction. What do you mean by signal transduction? Signal transduction is actually the communication between cell to other cell. It is brought about by the molecule markers or molecules as a signaling molecule that evokes response to evoke physiological cascade of events. That is what we call signal transduction. Example of a signal transduction mechanism is hormone action. The hormone is released by a gland, and the hormone targets a particular tissue and involves the transformation of that tissue or organ. That is what is an example of a signal transduction. So any changes that happens because of signaling molecule is known as signal transduction. That's why our IMUREGEN is known to be our IMUREGEN extract is known to be a signal transducing agent. Signal transducing agent, transducing or changes in biological activity is known as signal transduction mechanism. So every change in our activity is actually a function of what you call signal transducing agent, be it be a hormone, a growth factor, a supplement, an environmental factor, are considered to be signal transducers that contributes to. So signal transducers that contributes to aging. Example to this are our food additives, radiation, pollution are signal transducers. So in short, signal transducing molecules are those that influence our daily lives and the activities of our body. So all those contributes to what you call multifactorial process of aging. There are several theories regarding aging process. So let us tackle some theories of aging so that we'll be able to trace out what shall we do in order to prevent aging. Now, from these theories, you take note of some elements of aging so that we can prevent the aging process to occur. One theory is known as the wear and tear theory. The wear and tear theory of aging is simply the cumulative result of fundamental and universal deteriorative processes such as oxidation, molecular damage, wear and tear, or accumulation of adverse byproducts that happens in everyday life. So every day we deteriorate, every day we oxidize, every day we reduce. Oxidation reduction reaction are process of is part of life dynamics. So aging is a dynamic system, simply accumulating the results of this deteriorative process such as oxidation, molecular damage, the wear and tear because of pollution, the wear and tear because of metabolic acids, the wear and tear because of some byproducts that are produced as we perform our functions. So accumulation of adverse byproducts is part of life. So it is said that we are not getting any younger because as we grow older, there are different byproducts that our body accumulate through time that may have an adverse effects on our body. So wear and tear theory involves one of the wear and tear theory is the hydrolytic damage of proteins and nucleotides. Take note that hydrolytic, the word hydrolytic meaning water. So this is actually pertaining to the breaking of molecules due to addition of water. So although water is good, but too much of this water causes hydrolytic damage that will break the proteins. And you see here, one of the target molecules wear and tear is nucleotides. And that is the reason why you will notice that we always emphasize the supplementation of nucleotides because nucleotides are always bombarded with hydrolytic damage every day. And what are those factors that causes hydrolytic damage? One of those are the enzymes coming from the food we eat, and another one is radiation coming from the sun can also activate hydrolytic damage to nucleotides. So this is the reason that we tell everybody that every day, if you're a normal human being, you need to have a constant supplementation of nucleotides and proteins because nucleotides are always the subject of hydrolytic damage. And during metabolism, when we eat, when we breathe, when we digest our food, there is a generation of what you call the highly reactive oxygen species or ROS. So when we breathe the air is used for respiration and the air is used for oxidation. And during the process of digestion is also equated with oxidation. And therefore, eating process is also producing what you call large amount of ROS. So the faster, the more voracious eater you are, the more ROS you produce. That's why, accordingly, those people who are voracious eaters die earlier because during the eating process or during the digestive process, we produce reactive oxygen species because there is no degradation of food without the presence of oxygen. That in the process of degradation of food, when oxygen is needed, it produces what you call ROS. In other words, it implies that the more you eat, the more ROS you produce. So in short, one of the mitigating factors in order to reduce or slow down the aging is eat less. Kumain ka ng konti lang. Eat less. So fasting is one of the mitigating measures. Fasting or abstinence of food is one mitigating factor to reduce the highly reactive oxygen species, and therefore eating less will result to less ROS, therefore slow wear and tear or slow aging process. So the more you eat, the more you age, and the more you age, the shorter is your lifespan. I would like to tell you one of the experiments that we have conducted on Caenorhabditis elegans. It's a kind of worm. This worm survives only for 14 days. But they have tried to reduce the feeding of the worms by 50%. And all those worms that were fed only 50% have increased their lifespan by 100%. So in other words, if you reduce your food intake, so if you used to eat 2 cups of rice, you only eat only 1 cup of rice, your aging process will be added with 100%. So the less food you eat, the less intake of food, the less highly reactive oxygen species. So in other words, my brothers and sisters and hearers, that fasting or what you call dietary restrictions or eating less would result to longer lifespan. And according to the wear and tear theory, multiplication of destructiveness of reactive oxygen species during metabolism is a chain reaction down the line. There will be formation of free radicals, and of course, with free radicals, mitochondrial ages of Turing says. In one of the experiments, they have found out if you eat lots of sugars, if you are fond of eating sugar, one of the electron carriers in the mitochondrial membrane jumps out and it causes the death of the mitochondria. And once the mitochondria will die, the cell will die, and of course your body will deteriorate because the mitochondria is considered to be the powerhouse of the cell. And another wear and tear theory is contributed by UV radiation or ultraviolet radiation. This is the reason why that I am telling you, do not expose yourself to the sun more than 30 minutes a day because the sun has plenty of ultraviolet radiation that will cause the damage of nucleotides, the damage of proteins and the damage of tissues in our body. And the other mechanism for wear and tear is the damaging. The cross-linking of protein is known as glycation. So when proteins are conjugated with sugar, it will now become glycated. So proteins that are glycated will now be destroyed, and it causes the breaking of or the dysfunction of that protein because of cross-links. So be careful, with more sugar, more eating, more cross-linking, more damage to your nucleotides, more damage to your proteins. Molecular repair mechanisms will combat the wear and tear. So take note here now, we are going to inject the idea of enzymatic and chemical reactions intercept the damaging reactive oxygen species. So now we say that the antioxidant, for example, or those molecules that will eat, because they're what they call scavenging, there are scavenging molecules that will destroy the ROS. Example to this are the vitamins and minerals. Our fulvic mineral is one of those that will intercept the damaging effect of reactive oxygen species. That you will notice that if you are going to supplement with nucleotides or IMUREGEN, you have to couple it with the supplementation of fulvic mineral, because the minerals in the fulvic intercepts the damaging effect of the highly reactive oxygen species. So in other words, when you supplement nucleotides, you supplement vitamins and minerals, the minerals in the fulvic will intercept the damaging effects of the reactive oxygen species. In other words, the minerals in the fulvic are the ones receiving or destroying the reactive oxygen species. You will notice that the synergistic effect of fulvic mineral is actually on the interception of the highly reactive oxygen species, because metallic elements, minerals, have the ability to absorb those reactive oxygen species, and therefore it reduces the toxic effects of this ROS. So another aspect of molecular repair and mechanism is DNA integrity is maintained by proofreading and repair mechanisms. As we know that the 118 oligopeptides in our IMUREGEN helps maintain the integrity of our DNA by manufacturing proteins that would maintain the integrity of the DNA. Because the DNA does not survive alone. The DNA is always integrated with proteins that will buffer the effects of radiations. So in other words, the DNA is not alone. The nucleotide is not alone. The nucleic acid polymers is associated with proteins, and our body is actually equipped with what you call proofreading enzymes. I read one of the manuscripts of the IMUREGEN clinical book. It says there that our IMUREGEN extracts actually initiates the synthesis of protein that will enhance the proofreading mechanism of our body. In other words, when you take your IMUREGEN supplement, it will enhance your body to produce proofreading enzymes that would detect any error in the DNA. In other words, this is the reason why it is very, very important to take note that our IMUREGEN has the proofreading mechanism, or the ability to do a proofreading as one of the actions of IMUREGEN extracts. One of the actions of the 118 oligopeptides is production of proofreading and repair enzymes that are actually found in our body. It is through this supplementation that we can increase the proofreading mechanisms of our body, because as according to the dogma of therapeutics that the body heals itself, our body has its own mechanism. Our God in the universe have integrated, has instituted within our cell the proofreading mechanism to recognize any error of DNA damage that may occur because of environmental factors. Every day we are bombarded with chemicals. Every day we are bombarded with air pollution, chemical pollution, water pollution, food additives, food preservatives, and therefore the error in the nucleotides is inevitable. But because our God in heaven has provided us proofreading enzymes, we are able to discern. Our body can now read the error because we are provided with proofreading enzymes. Therefore, we can say that maintaining the integrity of the DNA is a function of the proofreading enzymes that is provided for in our IMUREGEN supplement. Proofreading enzymes are provided by our IMUREGEN extracts found in the function of the 118 oligopeptides that are found in our IMUREGEN bottle or our IMUREGEN capsule or our Immune Plus tablets. So this is the central focal point of mitigating aging by molecular repair, reducing the wear and tear by enzymatic repair, enzymatic interception, and the buffering effect of the fulvic mineral, the buffering effect of vitamins, and the proofreading enzyme production by the epigenetic factors that are contributed by our IMUREGEN extracts. So, the hydrolytic damage to proteins and nucleotides is actually due to water. So, water is a weak nucleophile. Although we are advised to drink more water, pero too much of water is also dangerous because it provides a nucleophile that would now cause hydrolytic damage. So therefore, they should do it in moderation. Do not overdo. No? Water is a weak nucleophile. It is ubiquitous. The meaning of the word ubiquitous is that it is present everywhere. It is in high concentration, in high concentration that react susceptible agent. The amide band, which is the band between amino acid to another amino acid in a protein, is the most frequently target of this hydrolytic damage on the side chains, particularly asparagine to glutamine, asparagine to aspartic acid, glutamine to glutamic acid as they are exposed to water. So this replaces neutral amide group to acidic carboxylic group, leading to introduction of acids and base, and that causes what we call the hydrolytic damage. So this is an example of hydrolytic damage. Glutamine is an amino acid converted to glutamic acid, is part of what you call the hydrolytic reaction. Asparagine as another amino acid is converted to aspartic acid by addition of water and is converted into ammonia and ammonium. Hydrolytic damage to proteins and nucleotides. These are amino groups projecting from the heterocyclic aromatic rings of the nucleotide bases like adenine, cytosine, guanine are then converted because of hydrolytic attack. Some of the nucleotides are replaced by carbonyl group to form uracil, hypoxanthine, and xanthine respectively. And so therefore, production of uracil because of hydrolytic damage causes DNA instability. The DNA instability is due to hydrolytic damage. So be careful ha. Our adenosine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine are then converted to uracil, or our adenine are converted into xanthine and hypoxanthine respectively. The bond between the nucleotide bases and the deoxyribose moieties of the sugar of the DNA and RNA are vulnerable for hydrolysis or hydrolytic damage. So, my dear hearers, our DNA is always subjected or a target of hydrolytic damage because of radiation and the effect of too much water. It could leave a gap in the DNA and therefore a mutation. If it is not recognized, there will result of frame shift mutation, and therefore down the line it will alter the coding of the sequence, and therefore it will alter the DNA sequence and the protein sequence. Therefore, it will alter the function of a particular protein molecule. The reactive oxygen species generated by respiration. As I said, ROS is generated when we do respiration and metabolism. So you may ask, Doc, where do we get the ROS? We get the ROS during the eating process. We generate our own ROS in our respiration. We generate high levels of ROS during eating process. The more you eat, the faster you eat, the more reactive oxygen species you have. So in other words, what I am trying to suggest here is reduce your food intake and supplement it with IMUREGEN. You will have a very good fighting ability against the reactive oxygen species. Reduce your eating, but improve your supplementation of nucleotides and oligopeptides coming from our IMUREGEN is one of the important mitigating factor against aging process. Less eating, because more eating, more reactive oxygen species are generated. Enzyme catalyzed by oxidation because of biological oxidation by molecular oxygen will produce what you call the reactive oxygen species, because during the process, hydroxylation of proline and lysine, especially in collagen, it will actually degrade your collagen and therefore weaken the integrity of your tissues, and especially will make your blood vessel brittle, and therefore you are prone for cardiovascular damage. Generation of what you call the chemiosmotic gradient in mitochondria by electron transport. So with high reactive oxygen species, it will slow down the chemiosmotic gradient, which in our discussion before, the chemiosmotic gradient is one of the important processes by which ATP production is elevated by electron transport system in the inner membrane of the mitochondria. So the leakage of this electron because of ROS, that ROS then cause the leakage of electron flow, is the major source of ROS in human cells. So the leakage of electron flow in our mitochondria is the major source of highly reactive oxygen species in human cells. So I repeat, the more you eat, the more food, the more voracious eater you are, the more ROS you have in the human cells. So these are examples of the reactive oxygen species. You have the superoxide, you have the hydroxyl, peroxyl, alkoxyl, hydroperoxyl, and the non-free radicals such as hydrogen peroxide or H2O2, hypochlorous acid, the ozone, the singlet oxygen, and the peroxynitrite. There are also reactive nitrogen species like nitric oxide, nitrogen dioxide, peroxynitrite. These are all available in the preservatives. Dinitrogen tetroxide, nitrous acid. These are examples of our highly reactive nitrogen species. So I repeat, there are so many highly reactive oxygen species on preservatives. So I would suggest do not you overuse mga canned goods or preserved foods, because preserved foods are rich in reactive nitrogen species. Reactive oxygen species generation during respiration. The reactive oxygen species display a strong tendency to form adducts. These are direct addition of two or more compounds with nucleotide bases or the polyunsaturated fatty acids and other biomolecules possessing multiple double bonds that will cause the deposition of cholesterol in the blood vessel walls of our body. With high in ROS, you are prone for cardiovascular diseases such as heart problems, heart enlargement. You are prone for atherosclerosis and the formation of plaques. It leads to the formation of cross-linked lipid-to-lipid and lipid-to-protein adducts and a loss of fluidity, membrane fluidity, and integrity. It causes your membrane to be brittle. and it will trigger apoptosis or programmed cell death. So highly reactive oxygen species will generate or trigger apoptosis. Another reason for aging are the free radicals. The free radical theory of aging is actually any molecule that is unpaired. A free radical is any species of molecule capable of independent existence, hence the term free. They are the molecules that contain unpaired electrons. So those molecules that has unpaired electron are known as free radicals. Many of these unpaired electrons are actually found in bases and alkalis and acids. So soft drinks, for example, soft drinks is one example of the source of free radicals. Food additives, food coloring are example of free radical molecules. Harmon's observation says that lifespan was inversely proportional to the metabolic rate and by extrapolation respiration. So Harmon's observation that the lifespan of an individual is inversely proportional to the metabolic rate. So the faster is your metabolic rate, the shorter is your lifespan. So the more you eat, the shorter is your lifespan. Look at the formation of free radicals. The free radicals causes the DNA damage. So the object of free radical damage is the DNA. No, look at the radiation from the sun, metabolism in the mitochondria, and the food additives, the white blood cells, the air pollution, the nitric oxide, smoking, ionizing radiation from the sun. There are two ionizing radiation from the sun, X-rays and gamma rays. X-rays and gamma rays are considered to be ionizing radiations that can cause DNA damage. So do not expose yourself to the sun more than 30 minutes in a day because it will cause the DNA damage by hydrolysis and catalysis or production of ROS. The mitochondrial genome lacks surveillance and repair mechanisms that will help to maintain the integrity of nuclear DNA. Take note that the mitochondria has their own DNA. And since they lack surveillance system, they cannot repair because they don't have the ability to repair by itself. Mitochondria plays a central role in the sensor response pathways that trigger apoptosis. So take note that if your mitochondria is destroyed, apoptosis will ensure. Genes are encoded by the genome of the human mitochondria. So these genes are encoded by the genome of the human mitochondria. There are so many genes that are encoded in our mitochondria, and with the free radical damage, it will induce mutation and damage to our own system, damage to our tissues, and damage to our cells, and eventually death of our body. As I told you earlier, protein glycation is actually the formation of cross-linking between protein and sugar. Amino acid group found inside the side chain, like for example lysine and some of the nucleotide forms, reversible adducts with reducing sugars through the Schiff's base formation. So glycation is brought about by too much sugar. And there's Amadori arrangement to have a conjugated carbon-to-carbon double bonding which react with amino group of neighboring proteins that causes what you call the traction of cholesterol to the damaged tissue. Physiologic impact of age is more pronounced when long-lived protein, collagen, and crystallines are involved. It provides the opportunity of the multiple glycation and cross-linking events to occur. So with too much exposure to sunlight, it will actually facilitate the formation of glycation. And in the presence of too much sugar, because of too much eating, it will increase the process called glycation. So aging is also equated with glycation. So take note, the more food you eat, the more glycation, the more DNA damage, therefore, the shorter is your lifespan. So progressive cross-linking of collagen network in vascular endothelium causes what you call the atherosclerosis, the making of your blood vessels brittle because of glycation. Progressive loss of elasticity, so that your collagen will be weakened and brittle. the thickening of the blood vessels because of glycation. So that's why diabetes is a preponderant or a contributing risk factor for the loss of elasticity of the blood vessels that causes what you call the cellulitis or vasculitis that results to vascular damage and results to cardiovascular disease. The promotion of plaques and formation of cholesterol in the blood vessel is due to glycation. So take note, glycation is a very important process in the formation of atherosclerosis. And this is prevented by supplementation of IMUREGEN because supplementing IMUREGEN can scavenge. IMUREGEN extract is a scavenger of free radicals. I repeat, our IMUREGEN extract is a very good scavenger of free radicals, scavenger of ROS, and it prevents the formation of glycation. Our IMUREGEN supplement prevents the formation of glycation or the formation of plaques. So this is the process of protein glycation. Glucose, say the glycation is triggered by the presence of sugar. Sugar added with protein in a Schiff's-based Amadori product, and then it cross-linking between sugar and the protein, and that is what we call the glycation process. From the word glycate, that is glucose, no? Glycation process. Aging and a program process. The brighter the candle, the faster it burns. So the more you eat, the higher metabolic rate, the faster you age. The more you eat, the faster you age. Because it is likened unto the brighter the candle, the faster it burns. So it shows metabolic rate is equated with the shortening of the lifespan. The duration of life varies inversely as the rate of energy expenditure is, or the basal metabolic rate. So reduction of your basal metabolic rate will increase your lifespan. I repeat, reduction of your basal metabolic rate will increase your lifespan because reduction of metabolic rate greatly reduces the highly reactive oxygen species. The metabolic theory of aging. Animals differ markedly in size, longevity, heart rate over the lifetime. Each expends similar amount of total metabolic energy in a magnitude of 7 times 10 to the 5 joules per gram. Over the time, continued generation of energy and related consumption of oxygen leads to accumulation of reactive oxygen species induce damage to proteins, to lipids, until a tipping point will occur and the molecule will break down. So one of the mitigating factors is the calorie restriction or diet. Fasting, therefore, coupled with IMUREGEN supplementation. So during the fasting process, you take more IMUREGEN, you can now destroy those free radicals, and with caloric restriction, you will increase your longevity and increase your lifespan. As I said in the experiment of the Sinorhabditis elegans, reducing your sugar intake by 1/2, it will increase your lifespan by 100%. So with calorie restriction, restricted diet, fewer burning calories, and therefore fewer production of the damaging reactive oxygen species. This is now the metabolic theory of aging. So with less metabolism, increased lifespan. Less metabolism, couple it with supplementation of IMUREGEN, will be a perfect combination in order to reduce our aging process. I repeat, reduce your metabolic activity, reduce your eating process, couple or fasting, and then couple it with IMUREGEN supplementation. It will effectively reduce the reactive oxygen species, therefore it will increase your lifespan. So apoptosis or programmed cell death, when the cell is compelled to commit suicide. So apoptosis is actually a suicide of the cell, especially involving the enzyme caspases. They break down the cellular components needed for survival, and they will undergo what we call programmed cell death, including the destruction of the DNA and several proteins inside the cell. These are the processes by which the destruction process, cytoplasmic nuclear condensation, chromatin margination, membrane and cell explosion, implosion, formation of apoptotic bodies, recognition and engulfment by phagocytic cells, and swelling of the cytoplasm, osmotic shock, and release of intracellular components that causes the cell damage. Necrosis will also ensure when the cell die because of external force such as poison, mechanical damage, bodily injury, an infection, or being cut off from blood supply causes what you call necrosis. That's why heart attack is a form of necrosis. When the cell dies because of necrosis, it is very destructive. The death causes by inflammation that cause further distress or injury of the body. So necrosis is the death of the cell by physical means, by chemical means, by poison, and bodily injury. And this is aggravating factors in the aging process. So as of what I've said, one of the contributory factors for reduction of age is actually the shortening of the telomere sequence. It is a tandem repeating sequence of a particular nucleotide that is found in each of the chromosome. So every time the cell divides, the telomere is shortened. That's why we have to prevent the shortening of the telomeres. So how do you prevent your telomere to shorten? One of the mitigating factor to increase or to reduce the shortening of the telomere is reduce the amount of ROS. More vitamins, more supplementation will establish the genetic stability, nucleotide repair, nucleotide integrity is established. Therefore, it will establish also our telomere and therefore increase the lifespan. So telomeres are repetitive DNA sequence at the ends of all chromosomes, and aging cells have shorter telomeres. So if your telomeres are shortened, it will undergo cell death. And the shorter the telomere is, the faster is the aging process. So in order to combat the aging process, is we have to supplement nucleotides. Our IMUREGEN bottle contains extracts coming from gonads, and it was found out that extracts coming from gonads, if it is a high telomerase activity, then therefore it will lengthen or extend the telomere sequence in order to prevent the shortening of the telomere sequence. Therefore, supplementing IMUREGEN therefore could strengthen and promote telomere length. In the human chromosome, the telomere is about 8 to 14 kilobase long, or another 8,000 to 14,000 base pairs. Telomeres are thought to be the time clock that regulates how many times the cell divide, and telomeres will shorten each time the cell divide. That is actually the natural process. So shortening of telomeres is a natural process. In order to prevent that, we have to supplement those that will promote telomerase activity, and that telomerase activity is very, very abundant in our IMUREGEN supplement. I repeat, telomerase activity is very abundant in our IMUREGEN supplement. When exhausted, roughly about 100 cell division in humans, mitosis or cell division stop, and then somatic cell enters into senescence or aging. So telomerase is an enzyme that will now multiply the telomere or extend the telomere sequence in stem cells and most of those cells that are involved in cell division. The ability to prevent replicative senescence during this enzyme that maintains telomere are full-length present of most compelling evidence of the operation of the telomere clock as the most important factor in determining the lifespan of the body. So our lifespan is greatly affected by the length of our telomeres. So we have to endeavor our telomeres to be maintained so that our lifespan would be extended. So what are therefore the anti-aging process? The code for small set of transcription factors called PHA4, the DAF16, that are presumably genes that are found in our body that control the expression of aging that are critical to aging process. And what are these anti-aging agents? Number one anti-aging agent or number one factor to reduce aging is caloric restriction. So eat less. Kumain ng konti lang. Eat less or you call it caloric restriction. Eat small amount of sugar, fewer food or fewer metabolism. Exercise and laughing out loud. That's why the Bible says laughter is the best medicine. A merry heart doeth good like a medicine, and a broken spirit drieth the bones. Therefore, laughing is one aspect of anti-aging process. So, you take your less food, more exercise, more IMUREGEN supplementation, laugh it out with friends, and fellowship with one another. And then nucleotide supplementation is the latest finding to establish genetic stability and the telomere integrity to maintain our cell cycle so that the aging process will be decimated or controlled. Thank you very much and God bless us all. This is the end of my lecture.